Welcome to the Backlog of Horror. For those of you new here, which is a lot of you, hi by the way, every October I dedicate the month to playing horror games from my backlog. Partly it's to get into the appropriate spooky Halloween spirit, but also it's partly a way to force myself into playing more games from my backlog. It means less time staring at that list wondering what to play, and it's a way to get over that analysis paralysis that can definitely get in the way. I call it the Backlog of Horror. Now, last year I tackled some great games, Resident Evil 2 to 4 remake, Silent Hill 2's remake, and Slay the Princess. Check out that video to see my thoughts on those. Be warned though, it's like the 6th video I ever made on this channel, and let's just say my videos have gotten a bit better since then. But this year I played a few more games from my backlog. Maybe some of them are on yours. I'll try to keep my points relatively spoiler light and try not to spoil anything from too late into the games. Instead, I mostly want to talk about what works about them for me, anything I didn't like or care for, and then maybe talk a little bit about why you should give them a shot if you haven't already. Either way, let's get to the point of the video and talk about some games. Now, instead of doing what I just said I'm going to do, I'm going to talk about something else for a moment. No, not an ad segment. Raid Shadow Legends said the ad in the last video was too short and they won't return my emails. No, instead I wanted to talk briefly about 1979's Alien. It's one of my all-time favorite horror movies. Most people either love horror movies or hate them, and I'm firmly up the end of being somewhere in the middle. It depends on the movie really, but what I love about Alien is the way it effectively sets up dread without relying on jump scares. Sure, the film definitely has them, but they're a tool, not the whole toolkit. The real horror comes from the silence, the tension, the feeling that something awful is just out of sight. To me, that's what good horror does. It sticks with you. It's not just about a loud noise that makes you jump, it's the unsettling thoughts that keep you up later. Don't get me wrong, I don't hate jump scares. There are some fantastic, memorable ones out there, but when that's all that a game or a movie has, it feels a bit cheap, a bit hollow. Dead Space, though, definitely has some Alien in its DNA, among other influences, but the point is the way that it earns scares. The scariest moments aren't really when something is screaming in your face, but when you know something is running around but you haven't seen it yet. It's funny, I remember when Dead Space first came out, which was, wait, that was 17 years ago? What the fuck? Back in high school, everyone would talk about how it was the scariest game ever made. Like, people were swearing it was borderline impossible to finish just because it was so pants-shittingly scary. Now, in hindsight, a lot of that was probably just teenagers talking like experts on something they didn't know a lot about. I was guilty of it too. You wouldn't want to hear my horrible takes I'd be putting out there if I had a YouTube channel back then. But honestly, they're not that far off. Dead Space still holds up as one of the most tense, genuinely unnerving horror games I've ever played. Mind you, I played the 2023 remake of Dead Space, so I can't speak on behalf of anything that may or may not have changed from the original, but part of what I think makes Dead Space so effective is the way it understands that horror isn't just about what you see. In fact, maybe more important is what you don't see. You walk around through these dimly lit hallways, hearing scratching in the vents, then the game will let that silence hang for a while. They're least scary when they're in front of you and in plain sight. Instead, it's when they're breathing down your neck that it's the most terrifying. A lot of this is textbook horror, mind you, like the stuff you learn when you're just trying to first pull off any kind of good horror. But I still love it when I see it done well. It's like how the alien is least intimidating at the end of the movie, where you see the silly rubber suit and the illusion disappears. But rewind a little bit, and while you only saw the slightest glimpses, your imagination filled in the blanks. They kind of do this with Dead Space's story as well. Again, super spoiler light here, but right at the start you find out that the Ishimura is overrun by these necromorphs. But there's a lot of blanks. Are there survivors? What caused the necromorphs? Are they an alien that invaded the ship, or are they some kind of zombie?
The ones I saw, some of them were wearing Ishimura uniforms.
Okay, that doesn't prove anything though. Maybe it's like the Thing. Or maybe they take the clothes off their victims and put them on? The game will slowly trickle details to you throughout your playthrough, giving you plenty of time to dwell on these questions, as well as the consequences of their answers. And Isaac's design is absolutely iconic, a genuinely memorable character design. Just look at how recognizable that silhouette is. Okay, maybe not a great silhouette, but do this and bam, you instantly know that that's Isaac, the absolute icon that he is. The sound design in this game is also phenomenal. Every hiss of the vents, every distant clang, every groan of the metal under pressure adds to the sense that the ship itself is barely holding it together, much like me through much of my playthrough. The lighting does a lot too. I swear half of this game is illuminated by the world's weakest torch. There's that meme of cranking the brightness slider way up in horror games, and this game might be a strong argument for doing that. But that's exactly what makes it work. It's claustrophobic and oppressive, and when you step into a more open, brighter area, you just don't trust it. I love when horror games like this force you to do the scarier thing. There's this one room early on that you walk through and you realize that where you need to go is locked. You go up an elevator and go to a switch to unlock the door. Only thing is, you can only power 2 out of the 3 switches. The room, the elevator, and the lights. Well, you need the room unlocked and you need the elevator to get back down, meaning that the only option you can get rid of is... That dread felt having to make that decision might be scarier than any actual encounter that came after it, but it's because it was horror that I had to inflict on myself with my own hand. Also, I'm a sucker for things being diegetically in the world. There are video calls that are on these screens that come out of your suit. Your health bar is your spine lights. A lot of tutorial stuff comes in the form of either audio calls or logs or things written on the wall. It limits the amount of times that you're stopped and given a wall of text telling you what to do. It's good game design. I particularly really like the waypoint marker coming out of your hand and leading the way here. It's pretty cool, really clever, and I wish I saw more games adopted something like that rather than marks on an overcrowded minimap. I also like how the game sets expectations right at the start. From the moment you pick up your first mining tool, reliable here, which is one of the best weapons in the game in my opinion, the game tells you to dismember your enemies. Aim for their limbs, not their heads. It doesn't do this through some text box, but instead it's written in blood above where you pick it up. It's haunting stuff, and that's your tutorial. Unlearn what you've learned from shooters. Headshots are actually somewhat inefficient. Instead, aim for their harder to hit, constantly moving limbs and cut them off. They also do a really good job with the weapons in this game. There's a bunch that you'll collect. They all feel, for the most part, pretty unique, and the ammo is scarce enough that you'll be switching them in and out constantly, meaning you'll have to get used to all of them. Every encounter feels tense because the game never properly lets you relax. The menu doesn't pause the game, and neither does working on a bench or anything like that. I mean, there's an actual hard pause that does pause everything, but it doesn't allow you to do things like manage your inventory or upgrades. Those have to be done in real time as the monsters keep coming. There are also these zero gravity sections where you need to manage your oxygen supply, kinda analogous to an underwater section in a lot of other games. And like those, I've seen a lot of hate for them, or if not hate, at least a distaste for them. Now, personally, I don't think any of them were too egregious. They broke up the flow a little bit, and it was just another way that they made the Ishimura feel abandoned. But these damaged sections that have let the vacuum of space in, I'm not showing footage of them, but some of the zero gravity sections towards the end of the game are genuinely some of my favorite sequences in the whole game. Mind you, again, I'm playing the 2023 remake, so I'm unsure if these were worse than the original. It very well could be the case, because I heard the controls in the original were a bit of a nightmare too sometimes, but alas, maybe I'm more patient when it comes to these kinds of sections in games, so take my opinion with a grain of salt. It's funny to look back on high school me hearing that Dead Space was the scariest game ever made. I imagine something so extreme you'd have to play it with the lights on with a friend in the room just to survive. Now, finally playing it as an adult, I get it. It's not scary though in that it's loud or shocking or gory. I mean, it does do all those things, but it's also deliberate. It earns your fear the same way that Alien did, by giving your imagination space to torture you. It's kind of wild to think that it sat on my backlog for so long, but honestly, it's probably better I've played it now. After some years and a lot more exposure to horror, I have a clearer sense of what actually works for me in the horror genre. Last year, I started both the Backlog of Horror and I started watching horror movies every weekend of October, and that made me way more aware of what I like in the genre, and this is exactly it. Too bad we're pretty unlikely to ever see a Dead Space 2 remake. Now, if Dead Space is in your backlog, collecting digital dust while you convince yourself you'll get to it someday, maybe make it someday soon. It's a seriously tense game and maybe not the scariest thing ever made like my high school friends once thought it was, but honestly it might be one of the better scary things ever made. Maybe the single scariest moment of my backlog of horror last year was the opening to Resident Evil 3 Remake. Honestly, the game itself isn't particularly scary, but the thing that had me terrified was the fact that the game opens up in first person. I thought maybe I misunderstood what RE3 Remake was like. I thought, oh god, this one isn't in third person at all, it's first person? After Resident Evil 2 Remake, I was not prepared for a game that scary not being in third person. At least in third person, there's a degree of separation between you and the on-screen horror. Events are happening to your character, not to you. In first person though, that separation is gone, and now it's just you that experiences the horror. Starting up Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, I found it genuinely terrifying, especially in the early hours. The switch to first person was a massive change in direction for the franchise. It changes quite a lot about how the game feels to play, yet it always still feels like Resident Evil, which I was not expecting. All the normal stuff is here. There's inventory management, limited healing items, puzzles to unlock more progress, that same sense of scraping by after exhausting all of your ammo. All that classic DNA is there, only instead of the camera standing behind you giving you a great deal of control what you can see, the camera is strapped to Ethan's forehead. Ethan, of course, referring to Ethan Winters, the new protagonist of this entry in the Resident Evil franchise. Ethan's wife had gone missing a few years back, but he recently received an odd email detailing her whereabouts in some thought to be abandoned house in Louisiana, and that's basically the setup. As you drive there and you eventually discover the horrors within. Very early on, you walk through the estate, you're greeted by this rotting food, bugs crawling around everywhere. This area indulges in the grotesque, making it pretty memorable opening for the game. Jack Baker works really well as a textbook unkillable pursuer. You know, the survival horror enemy that after taking a few shotgun blasts takes a short nap, just short enough for you to be able to run away before getting back up and looking for you again. Fighting him head on, at least at this early point in the game, is unwise. And then you get to the old house where Margaret takes this idea and puts a fresh spin on it. With a deluge of bugs that means fighting back isn't an easy option at all this time. Each family member hits different notes of horror, whether that be the monstrous brute force, body horror, psychological dread. It makes the family feel unique as they toy with you throughout the game. Plus, I really like how they limited it to a couple of key locations again with this game. The most memorable part of Resident Evil 2 is learning every inch of the RPD, and the game seems to want to return to that design philosophy somewhat. Now, to put it out there, I'm aware RE7 came out before the RE2 remake, so it's probably a little bit more accurate to say some things about this game influenced the remake of 2 instead, but either way, the two are comparable. Now, I don't think the Baker House is quite as good as the RPD, but most settings aren't going to live up to that peak, and I think the Baker House does enough to make you feel claustrophobic. I just really like the presentation as well. The game looks pretty good for a game that came out in 2017. Sure, there are some lower resolution textures that are shown up pretty close to your face at times, but never really enough to distract you from the game, I don't think. And after Dead Space, I found myself instinctively walking up to every molded that I killed, looking for an ammo or health drop, like some Pavlovian behavior that I was conditioned to perform. It's an interesting design difference between the two games and what they want you to do. Dead Space expects you to fight everything. Every necromorph is a resource dispenser. Resident Evil, on the other hand, tells you that sometimes running away is the smarter play. Conserve your resources whenever possible, and explore as much as you can. You get so many resources from exploring around. The game is a good experiment from the Resident Evil franchise, I would say, and I welcome that experimentation. There's a new camera, new protagonist, new, not technically zombie, but also, yeah, kinda a zombie enemies. Give me more game series that are willing to shake things up like this. The Resident Evil series definitely needed a shake-up after the reception of Resident Evil 6. The series over time has become more action movie than anything to do with the survival horror genre. It seems like after some slower, more exploratory games gained traction, like 2013's The Last of Us, and especially the nearly mythic reputation of PT that even today is remembered as a peak of the horror genre, it's like after these games, Capcom went, hold my beer, and came back swinging to show that they could still do survival horror right. I really love these videotapes you find as well. They have you take on these other characters as they went through the horrors of the Baker House, and the stuff that you learn in these teaches you things for when you're going through as Ethan, which I loved this decision from a world design point of view. I thought it added a lot to the experience. Now, I did die a lot, probably more than any other Resident Evil playthrough to this point. I think part of it is the game, and at a few points, specifically in some bosses, it doesn't really communicate to you that well what you should be doing, as well as the way it kind of keeps you in the dark about what progress you're making. But part of it was definitely me, not noticing the game was telling me to do things and messing up because of it. None of this was to the point of getting too frustrated, mind you. For the most part, failures didn't feel too bad, and only at 1 or 2 points did I actually get annoyed with the game, which is hardly enough to ruin my experience overall with it. Also, I swore a lot at this game, especially early in the game. Not due to frustration though, it turns out that that's my default reaction to someone jumping out at me. It's shouting profanities and shooting them to death. Wouldn't have expected it, but apparently I fight instead of fly. Whoa, fuck you, Granny, where did you come from? Also, I went on to play the free Not a Hero DLC where you play as Chris Redfield, which was a cool victory lap at the end of the game. It's definitely more action focused, like the end of the main story, but that's to be expected both from Resident Evil and from Mr. Punch the Boulder here himself. Plus, how could I not? He might be my favorite Resident Evil protagonist for that scene alone. It's peak gaming, and if you disagree, you're wrong. Now, whether I'd recommend playing the DLC might come down to how much of a Resident Evil fan you are. It takes place right at the end of the game, and the main story does leave some question marks against a specific member of the Baker family. Well, it leaves some question marks against two of them, depending on the ending you get, and then there's another DLC for that other member. Look, I'm being a bit cryptic here on purpose to avoid spoilers, but if you've played the game, you maybe know what I'm talking about. Anyway, it's a bit of zombie shooting fun. If you're a Resident Evil fan, for sure, play it. Otherwise, if the main campaign more than gave you your fill, then just move on without guilt, honestly. Overall, Resident Evil 7 was a really worthwhile experience. I'd absolutely recommend giving it a go. The scares, at least in the first half of the game or so, hit really hard when they wanted to. I can see why people praise this game as much as they did, or do. If it's your favorite Resident Evil, I could definitely see why. It does a lot right. And most of what it doesn't is pretty forgivable. It's one of the strongest reinventions a long-running franchise has ever pulled off, and it left me genuinely excited to see where Ethan's story goes next. If Resident Evil 7 was doing Resident Evil 2, Resident Evil 8 is doing Resident Evil 4. Jesus, that makes absolutely zero sense. Resident Evil Village seems to take a lot of cues from Resident Evil 4, and funny enough, RE4 Remake probably took a couple of cues from this game, whether it's Village's charming merchant character, second best in the series of course, right after 4's, the far more abundant ammo, very early shotgun, even the map design shows a big departure from 7. In this, rooms are red until fully explored, and then they turn blue. Crafting is quicker and arguably easier, especially since the inventory menu now pauses the game, something I specifically noted was very interesting about RE7's design. Also, enemies drop crafting materials and money now, kinda closer to Dead Space's design philosophy rather than 7's. It signals to you that killing enemies gets you resources, so do it, and do it often. Also, the game looks really good actually. It's a big step up visually from 7, with the textures being much cleaner, really showing off what they can do with the RE engine here. The snowy village streets, the flickering candlelight and Castle Dimitrescu, all gorgeous, all moody. If nothing else, the game nails atmosphere. The story starts out in Ethan and Mia's home. A few years have passed since the events of Resident Evil 7. You're happy now, your daughter Rose, listening to your wife Mia read her a picture book before she asks you to put her to bed. You do so, then as you're having dinner, well, look, there's no way for me to talk about this next bit without spoiling it, so spoilers I guess for the first 5 minutes of the game. Chris and his agents rain gunfire into the building and kill Mia in front of you before taking you and Rose away. The opening, if nothing else, hits you in the gut, especially coming in fresh after RE7. It definitely sets up this game to have a lot more guns and a lot less slow scares than 7 did, which I suppose could be a disappointment depending on how you look at it, but I for one like Resident Evil both when it's being slow survival horror and action movie with zombies. Speaking of zombies, after waking up and walking to the titular village, you find your main enemy type you'll come across, and it's lichens. Now, mechanically these aren't all that different from zombies in the previous games unfortunately, but they definitely look different, so that's something. It's nice to see some other monster staples used though, like these vampires and Frankenstein's monsters. Some things never change though, like Ethan's hands constantly taking a beating. Poor guy, I should call him Mr. Hands at this point. Don't Google Mr. Hands, please. Unlike 7 or even 2 Remake, Village takes you through a bunch of very different locations. Typically you'll come back to the village as a kind of hub area, which I guess is a good enough reason to name the game the way they did, beyond the obvious Roman numeral 8 that they could hide in the title. Too bad that the next game is dropping that, but I guess with a new protagonist that makes sense. Anyway, early on you're introduced to the 4 lords under Mother Miranda, among which is of course the vampire lady Dimitrescu, who much of the marketing material was based around, and how can I blame them because I want to buy whatever she's selling. There are others though, like this freaky puppet girl or Heisenberg, whom we can only know where he is or how fast he's going, but not both. Pretty early on you're informed you must eliminate each of these lords one by one, then take down Mother Miranda to save Rose. Simple enough really, much more in line with the more actiony Resident Evils than the more horror focused ones, but not necessarily a bad thing. Now, I do say the game is pretty lacking in horror, but there's this one sequence which taps into a similar atmosphere as what we saw in RE7. And again, I won't spoil much, but that one sequence was excellently done. Almost worth playing the whole game for that alone. They still do tick some of the genre boxes though, like Lady Dimitrescu being a stalker type enemy like Jack Baker from 7. Then there's a more body horror section later where, like in 4, you come across a giant fish. It does sag a little bit in the middle though. There are parts that running between objectives on opposite ends of the village get tiresome, and I won't show footage of it, but the last boss is a bit of a slog. But otherwise, it's a pretty good entry in the Resident Evil series. There's lots of cool things to find by exploring, and I really enjoy these little ball rolling mini games that you can find, which reward you with a valuable that you can sell for a bunch of money. These things I thought were worth running around and finding because I think they're neat. Also, I say all of this from the perspective of someone playing through the game once. I know Resident Evil games are famously replayable, with so much extra stuff awarded to you to make the follow-up playthroughs feel fresh. The ability to skip cutscenes here is very welcome though, which is a mark against Resident Evil 7 unfortunately, as the unskippable cutscenes I'm sure would suck some of the fun out of repeat playthroughs. So yeah, Village is far from the scariest Resident Evil game and not the scariest way to wind up this year's backlog of horror, but it's a pretty fun one to play. Plus, with that one complete, I've played all the numbered entries between 2 and 8. Small caveat, 2 to 4 were remakes, but I think they should count. I notably haven't played the first game yet, and while it's not actually on my backlog, I think I probably should at some point go back and play it. I hear really great things about the remake. Plus, it feels odd to be missing out on just one of the main series. I'm sure there'll be some people who beg that I play the original 2 and especially the original 3, as I know they're considerably different than the remakes, and maybe one day for those too, but for now I have other games to get to. And whatever comes out of Resident Evil Requiem, I am excited to play it, as I think I can officially say I'm a fan of this series and want to see where it goes next. After finishing Resident Evil Village, I realized just how much I love doing this every October. The backlog of horror has turned into my favorite yearly ritual. It gives me a reason to finally start these games that I've been putting off, and honestly, it makes October feel special. If you've got horror games sitting in your backlog, maybe give one a try next October. Make an event of it. Start something. You might finally cross off a classic, or find a new favorite. I've still got a little bit of time left in this month, so I'm going to be diving into Silent Hill F next. I'll let you know what I think about it in my year-end video, but until then, happy Halloween, and I'll see you in the next one.